la séance.
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Subcommittee on International Human Rights of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development.
De la Chambre des communes. La réunion aujourd'hui.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Members are attending in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application.
The benefits of the witness and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. En ce qui concerne l'interprétation pour ceux qui sont sur Zoom.
For interpretation on Zoom, you have the choice. At the bottom of your screen, you have the floor, English or French. And for those who are in the room, you can use the earpiece, and you can select the desired channel.
For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage to speak in order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Conformément à notre motion de routine concernant.
In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting.
Today, we are meeting to resume our study of the situation of the Hazaras in Afghanistan. It's my great pleasure to welcome the witnesses who have joined us this morning. Ms. Sumaya Javadi, human rights activist by video conference. From Amnesty International, Zaman Sultani, South Asia researcher by video conference. Genocide Watch, Gregory Stanton, President by video conference. Vous aurez un maximum de 5 minutes.
You will have a maximum of 5 minutes for your opening statements, and then we will move on to questions from members of the subcommittee. I will signal to you when you only have 1 minute left.
We will start with Sumaya Javadi. Please, you have the floor for minutes for your opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear members of the committee, witnesses, and everyone, I am honored to be here today to testify on the conditions of the Hazara people in Afghanistan. My name is Sumaya. I am a Hazara woman. My people have suffered from the Hazara genocide throughout generations. In the late 19th century, 60 to 65% of the Hazara population had vanished due to systemic killings, starvation, being sold into slavery, and displacement by Amir Abdurrahman Khan's army. His famous quote is, "Hazara's heads are mine, their wives, their lands, and children are yours." My great-grandfather was forced to leave his homeland in central Afghanistan when he was around 12, and his family were killed by the Emir's army. Today, I stand before you, having been forced to leave my home by the same people who forced my great-grandfather to leave his more than 100 years ago. This is a genocide. To this date, this genocide has not stopped. In 1993, the Mujahideen's government commanded their army to attack civilians in Afshar, a Hazara-populated neighborhood in Kabul. They started a killing frenzy, beheading, dismembering, raping, setting homes on fire, kidnapping, and cutting people's genitalia. In 1997, months after I was born, the Taliban killed about 70 Hazaras, including children, in Qazalabad village near Mazar Sharif. To demonstrate their hatred towards Hazaras, they decapitated children and gouged their eyes out. In 1998, the Taliban attacked Mazar Sharif. Based on different reports, 2,000 to 8,000 Hazaras were killed over 3 days. The Taliban did not allow people to bury their loved ones, and the corpses of Hazara civilians were on the streets for days. In 1999, the Taliban abducted hundreds of people of Hazara people, men, women, children, and elderly, and burned about 200 homes in various villages in Bamiyan province. They confiscated Hazara lands and encouraged Pashtun nomads, Kuchis, to settle there. After 2001 international intervention in Afghanistan, this genocide found a new face. The Taliban and other terrorist groups have targeted Hazaras in their places of worship, in sport clubs, maternity hospitals, schools, educational centers, ceremonies, gatherings, and peaceful protests. On July 23, 2016, thousands of Hazara people, mostly university students, went on the streets of Kabul to peacefully protest a discriminatory policy of Ghani's government. I was 19 years old, and we were marching with friends and family when suicide bombers attacked the crowd. 86 people were killed and 400 were injured. I had a friend who was very close to the incident, and he could not eat meat for years, having witnessed burned human flesh. Our protests were ignored, and not a single person was persecuted for committing that crime. The years before the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, there were many attacks. From 2019 to the middle of 2021, before the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, the UN documented 40 terrorist attacks targeting Hazaras, resulting in almost 1,300 casualties. In 2020, a maternity hospital in Dashtabarchi, Kabul, a Hazara-populated area, was attacked by the terrorists, and 16 people were shot dead, including doctors, mothers about to give birth, and 2 newborns. In May 2021, Sayyid al-Shuhada High School, a girls' school in Dashtabarchi, was attacked by the terrorists. Around 90 students were killed and 240 others were injured. On August 15, 2021, at 6 p.m., I realized that Afghanistan had fallen to the Taliban. I was an educated Hazara Shia woman. I belonged to the ethnicity, gender, and religion most hated by the Taliban. People like me, still in Afghanistan, if not dead yet, are now totally excluded from every aspect of life outside the home. I had already faced gender-based and racial discrimination at the university and workplace. I knew the history, and I knew what was coming next. Since then, many terrorist attacks targeted Hazara communities across Afghanistan. In September 2022, there was an attack on the Kaj Educational Center. 55 high school students, mostly girls, were killed, and 124 others were injured. Marzia was a teenage girl who was killed in Kaj Educational Center. Her diary was widely shared on the social media. She had written about her dreams, riding a bicycle while listening to music, playing guitar, writing a novel. She was killed because she was a young woman in pursuit of knowledge, culture, and art. Because she was a Hazara with almond eyes, daring to dream of a future of equality and justice. The Taliban explicitly support the confiscation of Hazara lands and properties and the unlawful extortion of agricultural Hazara communities. International humanitarian aid does not reach Hazara areas. To this date, people who have directly committed this genocide and people who indirectly benefit from it.
Would you please wrap it out? Time is out. Can you wrap it out?
Yes. There was no single persecution done by any Afghan government. I came to Canada on October 15, 2021. At the Calgary airport, another Afghan non-Hazara family refused to stand in line behind Hazara families, and the Canadian police warned them and told them to get back in line. That was the first time in my life that I felt I was equal. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the great nation of Canada for welcoming 40,000 Afghans and more. Within the borders of Canada, I am equal, free, included, and my voice matters. I wish this upon every Afghan and especially every Hazara. I am appealing to you to recognize the Hazara genocide on behalf of my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and me, on behalf of Marzia and all women in pursuit of equality, on behalf of Hazara people across Afghanistan who are being forced to leave their lands and give it away. We simply want acknowledgement and justice. I am appealing to you to support a thorough investigation on the Hazara genocide by the International Criminal Court. I am appealing to you to take away the Taliban's and their allies' impunity in committing genocide and crimes against humanity. And
thank you, Ms. Javadi. We'll give you a chance and answer the question because you are over more than 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zaman Sultani to take the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the invitation to appear before this committee. I would like to start by noting how timely your study is. For more than a century, the Hazaras have been facing continual and systematic discrimination in their own homeland of Afghanistan. Since the Taliban returned to power in August 2021, Amnesty International has documented several massacres of civilian Hazara or Shia Hazaras in Ghazni, Daikundi, and Ghor provinces of Afghanistan. Also, after the Taliban returned, the Hazara have faced forced eviction in several provinces of Afghanistan, including Daikundi. No one has been held accountable for these crimes and killings. For example, in June 2022, the Taliban forces in a night raid killed 6 Hazaras. That night, the Taliban attacked the house of a former Hazara security official, Mohammadi Muradi, in Ghor province, that led to the Taliban killing him and 3 other men in his house. 2 of the 3 other men were also former members of the security forces. In addition, in these attacks, 2 daughters of Muradi were also killed, one of whom was only 12 years old. Muradi's son, who was 17 years old, barely survived the injury that he sustained during the attack. Muradi's stepmother was slightly wounded. In August 2021, the Taliban forces killed 13 Hazara, 11 of whom were former members of the security forces and were told to surrender to the Taliban and hand over their weapons. In addition to these 11 former security officials, 2 others who had no security background were killed by the Taliban forces. One of them was a 17-year-old girl. 9 of the 11 members of the security forces were shot dead after they had surrendered to the Taliban. The execution of soldiers who are surrendering is a war crime. In July 2021, the Taliban forces, after taking control of Malistan district of Ghazni province, massacred 9 Hazara from Munda Darakht village. 6 of them were shot, while the 3 others were tortured to death, including one of them who was strangled with his own scarf. At that time, due to the Taliban takeover, the villagers had fled from their homes to Ailaq, their summer grazing lands. Some of those killed had been detained and tortured to death upon returning to the village to collect food, as they had little food for 30 families, while others were ambushed, arrested, and killed by the Taliban at their checkpost. One of the victims, who had been suffering from depression, was not able to leave the village before the Taliban took over, and he was killed in the village. At the same time, in October 2021, Human Rights Watch reported forced eviction of Hazaras or Shia Hazaras from at least 5 provinces of Afghanistan. Forced eviction that targeted the Hazara and former government employees were based on ethnicity and political opinion. Those forced evictions were conducted with a few days' notice and with no opportunity to present their legal document. According to HRW, from 15 villages in Daikundi and Oruzgan provinces, 2,800 residents were evicted in September 2021 alone. Mr. Chair, despite this tragic situation, the Shia Hazaras have also been facing widespread and continued attack by the Islamic State of Khorasan province, as well as other armed groups across the country. Since 2015, Hazaras have been attacked at schools, in public transport, at mosques, during prayers, at sport clubs, hospitals, at wedding ceremonies, and during religious rituals. These attacks targeted civilians in civilian places. In some cases, each of these attacks left over 100 or more casualties. One of that example is the Koch Tuition Center, which Jawadi just mentioned. Another one of that is the attack that happened just a few days ago that left over dozens of people killed or worshippers and wounded in Baghlan province. The former government, too, failed to protect the Hazara against these attacks, and the situation is extremely grim under the Taliban. These include the fact that survivors and victims' families have faced restrictions to access hospital, clinics, or their own wounded relatives. The Taliban are also putting restrictions in place on media coverage of such attacks. With the Taliban back to power, Hazaras have been increasingly marginalized from decision-making processes and representations. The Taliban have replaced some of the former government employees in Hazara-populated areas, such as Bamiyan, Ghor, and Daikundi provinces, mainly due to their ethnicity, according to the UN Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in Afghanistan. There is no Hazara representation at the Taliban's cabinet. I'll stop here and will be happy to expand on these further during the question period. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sultani. And now I would like to invite Mr. Stanton to take the floor for 5 minutes, please. You are on mute.
Thank
Please
you.
unmute.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I just unmuted. Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be here with you today. I speak on behalf of Genocide Watch and the World Hazara Council, which approved my statement. The Hazaras are the Jews of Afghanistan. The Taliban and ISIS have marked them for extermination. The Hazara people are among the most persecuted peoples in the world. The Hazara are an ethnic and religious minority that have been facing systematic persecution and genocide in Afghanistan for over 100 years. The Hazara make up a quarter of the population of Afghanistan. Outside Afghanistan, Hazaras are one of the largest Afghan refugee groups in the world. But UNHCR in Afghanistan favors Sunni Muslims, so very few Hazaras have been sponsored for resettlement in nations that rely on the UN refugee system, including Canada and the US. Afghanistan is a country of minorities, with none of its ethnic groups making a majority. However, the Hazara people, predominantly Shia Muslims, are a religious minority in a Sunni Muslim majority country. So the Hazara have faced for many years, for at least a century, relentless systematic genocidal massacres based on their ethnic and religious identity. In the late 19th century, as one of our previous speakers mentioned, the Afghan ruler Abdul Rahman, who united Afghanistan, also waged a brutal war against the Hazaras, which killed 62% of Afghanistan's Hazara population. That is called genocide. Persecution of Hazaras continued into the 20th century. In the 1970s, the Afghan government did not allow Hazara people any access to higher education, especially in universities that train candidates for army and government jobs. The killing of Hazara people has been preached as a key to paradise by some Sunni Muslim clerics. In the 1990s, there were at least 9 genocidal massacres of Hazaras by the Taliban government and Al-Qaeda. Taliban commanders publicly proclaimed the slogan, Tajiks to Tajikistan, Uzbeks to Uzbekistan, and Hazaras to Goristan. Goristan is the Afghan Dari word for graveyard. In August 1998, in just a few days, the Taliban massacred 8,000 Hazaras in Mazar-e Sharif. In 2002, the Hazara people of Afghanistan have suffered over 300 targeted massacres. Since 2015, the Islamic State Khorasan, ISKP, affiliated with the Haqqani network, and it has claimed responsibility for some of these massacres, giving the Taliban a way to deny responsibility, even though the Haqqani network is part of the Taliban government. To date, none of these crimes carried out against Hazara people has been Afghanistan. These massacres have all the elements of the crime of genocide in Article 2 of the 1948 Genocide Convention. They include killings of members of the group, creating serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, and creating conditions of life calculated to destroy the group. Under Taliban rule since August 2021, genocidal attacks against Hazaras have increased significantly. Hazaras have been attacked in educational centers, places of worship, maternity hospitals, sporting facilities, public gatherings, and wedding halls. A genocidal attack on a Hazara girls' school murdered 58 Hazara girl students. Yet the UN and the international press nearly always refuse to identify the victims as Hazaras and fail to note the ethnically and religiously targeted nature of this genocide. This is called genocide denial. The Hazara people are enduring a continuous slow-motion genocide by attrition in Afghanistan. Urgent Canadian and international action is needed to protect the Hazaras of Afghanistan. I conclude with the following recommendations. The UN, US, EU, UK, journalists, and human rights organizations must recognize that these systematically targeted attacks against Hazara people in Afghanistan meet the definition of genocide, the intentional destruction of a substantial part of an ethnic and religious group as such. The UN and national governments should initiate urgent consultations with Hazara organizations for the protection of the Hazara people. The UN Human Rights Council should establish an independent fact-finding mission to investigate the ongoing systematic attacks on Hazara people. The International Criminal Court should expand the scope of its authorized investigation into war crimes in Afghanistan to include cases of crimes against humanity and genocide against the Hazara people. And finally, and this is the most important recommendation of all for the Canadian Parliament, we urge all refugee resettling countries, especially Canada, the United States, and Australia, to prioritize Hazara refugees for asylum and resettlement. Canada must increase the number of visas for asylum seekers for Hazara people specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you for agreeing to appear today. We'll start. I'm sorry. I will now open the floor for a question, but before, I would like to ask the committee, instead of having 7 minutes in round one and 5 minutes in round two due to the restriction on time, is it possible to have 4 minutes in each round or 5 minutes for? What do you prefer, please? So I would like to start with Mr. Guinness. You have the floor for 4 minutes, Mr. Guinness.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to rip through quickly then. Ms. Javadi, I have been told that the National Resistance Front is inclusive of people from different ethnic groups and religious backgrounds. I've been advocating for greater engagement by our government with the National Resistance Front. From your perspective, is there a constructive relationship between the Hazara community and the National Resistance Front, and would it be in the interests of Hazara people for Western governments to provide more support to this and or other resistance organizations in Afghanistan?
Thank you for your question. I'm not an expert on this, but from what I know that they do not represent Hazara people, obviously, but I support the organizations and people who resist the Taliban. Whoever is against the Taliban is with us. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the other witnesses want to weigh in on the relationship between Hazaras and the NRF or other resistance groups and the wisdom of Western governments engaging with resistance groups? Okay. Thank you. So if I think about what we can do in response to the horrific violations of human rights against Hazaras, many of the types of measures this committee would recommend, sanctions, for example, speaking out, given that the de facto authority in Afghanistan, the Taliban, are already a listed terrorist organization in Canada, it's challenging for me to identify what sort of further actions we could take in the direction of isolating or holding accountable the Taliban. Listing as a terrorist organization is it's probably the furthest one can go in that sense. So possible engagement with the opposition, proposals have been made around immigration measures, but what could beyond that? What could we be concretely recommending in response to these events? Anybody wants to engage on that?
Well, I was legal advisor to the Ukrainian independence movement, BRUK, back between 1988 and 1992. Doesn't that sound like a long time ago? But I am a strong believer in having diaspora communities support the overthrow of tyrannical governments. They can make a huge difference. I know that because they had that effect in Ukraine. In fact, I know some of the Ukrainians in Canada who made that happen. In fact, one of them was your foreign minister. And in fact, the same was true here in the United States. So I strongly believe that if more visas are given to Hazaras to come to Canada to resettle, even if it temporarily, it will have a big impact inside Afghanistan. So my major recommendation, as I said in the talk that I just gave, is to greatly increase the number of visas that you specifically earmark for Hazaras from Afghanistan to come to Canada. That has not been done yet. Specifically recognizing them as a religious and ethnically persecuted community, just the way the Jews were during the Holocaust.
I think we're out of time, but if the other witnesses have further response to that, maybe others will raise it, but I'll also welcome your feedback in writing with those specific suggestions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Guinness. And now I would like to invite Madame Van den Belt to take the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all of our witnesses. Just before I start my questions, though, Ms. Javadi, at the end, you didn't get a chance to finish your remarks with the recommendations to the committee, so I'll just give you a few moments to do so.
Thank you very much. We simply want acknowledgement and justice. I am appealing to you to support a thorough investigation on the Hazara genocide by the International Criminal Court. I am appealing to you to take away the Taliban's and their allies' impunity in committing genocide and crimes against humanity. And the first step in doing so is to recognize the Hazara genocide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my first question, and I'll pose this to Mr. Soltani first, but Ms. Javadi, if you'd like to also respond. Certainly when there's situations where you have a group that is not only marginalized and oppressed, but also silenced, the possibility of getting information out to the rest of the world about what is happening in real time becomes extremely difficult. And in that regard, I'm very pleased that you're here and able to testify. But I notice a lot of what you're talking about are things that happened in 2021, 2022, or previous in history. I wonder if you could tell us about what is happening right now in this moment, and what you know, and how we might be able to learn more about the current situation, which I understand to be quite tragic and dismal. If I could go to Mr. Mr. Soltani first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for these questions. I mean, unfortunately, the situation is so difficult to get information out from Afghanistan, in particular from rural areas where, the Hazaras are living, or, many others. So the atrocities that are happening at those areas, it is near to impossible to hear or to collect and to verify, that. So it is very, very difficult. And as I said in my statement, today the Hazara representations weren't decision-making, or the structure of the government where they can protect themselves is the same. There is no change. And additionally, this year, we saw the Taliban put additional restrictions on the Hazaras, on the Shia Hazaras, for their religious rituals. At large from the beginning, and then additional restrictions were introduced at the provincial level, as you see from UNAMA's report that they said today. And another thing, the situations with the forced evictions is continuous. And one of the cases that they have, reported about, without being very specific in terms of who the perpetrator is and how it has been happened. So only in the past few months, I think 6 people, Hazara in Khas Uruzgan, were killed. And then several houses and properties were destroyed or destroyed. And when it comes to accountability, unfortunately, we don't see any accountability to what the Taliban are doing, and so that is the very, very difficult situation. And I just wanted to add another point to the situation of Hazara is that, unfortunately, it is now a situation that we and everyone else in the attention at the international community is asking the oppressor to protect the victims. So if you look to the background of the Taliban, they massacred Hazaras in the 90s. A key example of that is Mazar Sharif, that can amount to genocide, and it's so horrible. They did in Bamiyan and several other areas, and some of that we have investigated. Amnesty International has investigated and verified and reported to these.
Thank you, Mr. Sultani. Sorry, time is off. Thank you, Mr. Sultani. Thank you, Ms. Vanderman. Et maintenant, j'invite Monsieur.
And now I will invite Mr. Denis Trudel to take the floor for 4 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses as well for their very touching opening statements on the topic of what is happening currently in Afghanistan. My current question will come back to what happened back in 91 and 93. So could each of you say, do you consider what happened at this time a genocide?
Yes, definitely. The definition of genocide doesn't depend on the number of people killed. It is it's a term, a legal term, that is defined by the intent of the perpetrators. In that period, 91 to 93, the Taliban were still killing Hazaras, and the Hazaras were targeted because they're Hazaras. That is called genocidal intent. So definitely it was genocide.
Madame Javani.
Ms. Javani?
I totally agree with Mr. Stanton. If you just look at the things that they do, for example, in the recent years when they attack a maternity hospital to kill newborns, to kill women, pregnant women about to giving birth, their intent is to extinct Hazara people, and that amount to genocide. And it doesn't matter if it is the recent years or 91 to 93 or 100 years ago. The matter is that they do not stop. They are not stopping. Thank you.
D'accord, merci.
Thank you. I can see the extent to which you think it's important that Canada recognize the existence of this genocide between 91 and 93. What would this offer to the community if Canada, being an important power, were to recognize this genocide?
That's very good, because Canada is an important power. In fact, I believe Canada has taken the leadership of the world in human rights. And I'm sorry to have to say that with what has happened in the U.S., but it would make a difference if Canada recognized that genocide and recognized the ongoing genocide, which we defined as a genocide by attrition. In other words, you don't have to do all the killing. In just a few years, you can have it go on for 100 years, and that's what's happened.
Monsieur Zultani.
Mr. Zultani, why do you think that this is not yet the case? Why has Canada not yet recognized what is happening in Afghanistan as a genocide?
Well, I have two. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. He has his hand up.
You please go ahead. I heard it was my name.
No, Mr. Sultani, you should go.
Thank you. I mean, as Mr. Stanton, I think rightly has said, is Canada is an important country, is a powerful country, and can play the crucial role in terms of recognizing the atrocities that the Hazaras has faced or still facing in Afghanistan. In particular, in view that those who massacred the Hazaras, if not all of them, most of them are still in power within the Taliban. You know, in Mazar, they targeted specifically Hazara for being Hazara. Apart, you know, there were some military killed, but they targeted Hazara civilian only for being Hazaras. There are plenty of reports for that. And those Taliban who were in power at that time, they are still ruling the country. So this gives a huge hope to the victims, to the people, not only Hazara, but, you know, others in Afghanistan, that justice can come at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Sultani. You
recognized.
on the second round go for more explanation. Now I would like to invite Ms. McPherson to take the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. This is very difficult testimony to hear, and I can only imagine extraordinarily difficult testimony to give. I also want to say I mentioned this to other members of the Afghan community who've testified before this committee, but I also want to give my sympathy to all those who are suffering because of the recent earthquakes in the region, and we know the need to get development aid there, and humanitarian aid there is very pressing. I want to start with Ms. Javadi, if I could. You spoke about the need for acknowledgement and justice as being one of the key pieces that you'd like to see action on, but you also spoke about being in Saskatoon, I believe, that you did travel through Pakistan to come to Canada. We are trying to make sure that the government allows more folks that are fleeing violence, particularly the Hazaras, particularly members of parliament, those that are most vulnerable, to come. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges you faced coming to Canada, finding your way here through Pakistan?
Thank you for your question, and I think that a big problem for Hazara people in Afghanistan is that they don't have access to foreign humanitarian aids, because Hazaras were excluded from the political system, and the government, they weren't on the high positions in the government. They didn't have strong connections to the foreign countries, and if they were in high positions, they didn't have enough authority, and these things makes Hazara people more isolated. And so the way that I could find my way to Canada, it was just a miracle, and I was lucky. I am here, and many people who maybe are worthier than me and are at risk as well, they are not, and it's just that I was lucky. I know that Hazara people inside Afghanistan, they are isolated, and they don't have enough connections, and they don't have enough money even in comparison to other ethnicities, and all of these things makes it harder for them to find their way out.
Thank you, and I could say we're lucky that you are here. We're glad that you are here. I think, Mr. Stanton, I might ask you the next question. You did make it very, very clear that in your opinion, genocide is happening right now. And we've been talking about people leaving Afghanistan, the Hazaras leaving Afghanistan and fleeing their communities, and what the Taliban has done to, in fact, make that happen. And we know that forced displacement is one of those pieces of how we define a genocide. It's through the Article 7 of the Rome Statute of the ICC. Can you talk a little bit about how that is how the forced displacement of the Hazaras is contributing to your interpretation of a genocide in Afghanistan?
Sure. Opposed to some lawyers who would like to think that forced displacement and genocide cannot be done together, we think they're almost always done together. In other words, that forced displacement is not only a sign of genocide, because what's happening is people are being terrorized to leave a country. And that part of that terror is genocidal massacres. And these genocidal massacres, which are genocide, are a way that the Taliban and ISIS-K have, in fact, forced a lot of Afghans to leave. In other words, these crimes are connected. One is a crime against humanity, as you know. The other is genocide, which is really also a crime against humanity. So our definition of genocide in the Genocide Convention includes creating conditions of life calculated to destroy the group in whole or in part. That's why it's a genocide.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Now we would like to start with round number 2, and I would like to invite Mr. Ali Ahsasi to take the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me to start off by thanking the 3 witnesses, Ms. Javadi, Mr. Sultani, and Mr. Stanton for their really, really powerful testimony. I think we can all agree on this committee that the discrimination the Hazara have been facing has been long-standing, and it keeps getting worse. You have spoken about the terror campaigns about the Hazara in Afghanistan. You've spoken about the confiscation of land. So thank you for all of that. I will keep my questions very brief because of the fact that we only have 4 minutes. Ms. Sultani, you did at one point in your testimony suggest that humanitarian aid that is being sent to Afghanistan is not reaching the Hazara community. Do you have any recommendations on that particular front so we can ensure that it is being divvied up on an equitable basis and that it is reaching the Hazara community as well?
Did you mean me or Mr. Sultani?
I'm sorry, Ms. Javadi.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I know that it's not reaching to the Hazara communities because I hear from my people, and I know that humanitarian aid organizations, they use the Taliban's help to distribute their aids. So that's not a good way to do it. I suggest, if that's possible, because I'm not an expert on this, but I suggest using the help of local people to distribute the aids. That's a way to do it. And I would like to invite other witnesses to say their suggestions. Thank you.
I'll just say one thing. When the UNIMA mandate, the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, was up for renewal this past spring, we actually worked with the World Hazara Council to draft a new resolution to renew UNIMA's mandate. However, the pen in the UN Security Council for that was held by a Sunni Muslim country, and so the State Department decided a technical rollover of that mandate was what was needed. However, and this is very unusual, at the same day, the UN Security Council also authorized in Resolution 2679, the same day, a independent assessment, essentially by a human rights expert, that will be ongoing and will require this human rights person to give a report every 3 months. That's how serious things are.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. I was talking about the distribution of humanitarian aid on behalf of the international community. I do have one other question for you, Mr. Stanton. You suggested that the UN system unfortunately overlooks the fact that the Hazara are the most vulnerable of vulnerable when it comes to resettlement of refugees. Could you expand on that?
25 seconds remaining, please, quickly.
Yes, as others have mentioned, UNIMA is, dependent on hiring Afghans to administer its programs. And because of the political pressure from the Taliban under this current government, UNIMA has had to hire a lot of Pashtuns, people who are Sunni Muslims. So the religious discrimination that is present in Afghanistan gets absorbed into the UN mission. And that includes UNHCR,
And I'm afraid I'm out of
refugee
time.
agency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassasi. Now I would like to invite Mr. Guinness to take the floor for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was very interested, Mr. Stanton, in your comments about discrimination in the UN refugee determination system. When I was previously on the Immigration Committee, we did study issues of systemic racism in IRCC, the Canadian refugee determination, but I think this is an underexplored area, and it's important for our policy because we often rely on the UN refugee determination system, and I certainly have heard these kinds of allegations in other contexts as well, that there are certain minorities that are negatively impacted through the process. So I would invite you to just share a little bit more on that issue and some possible solutions. Possibly Canada can be trying to either work outside that UN refugee determination system or push these UN bodies to make reforms, possibly to include the voices of minority communities in that determination process.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. There's feedback there. There's in the UN resolution that we wrote with the World Hazara Council, we had a specific section in there urging the UN mission to hire people from many different ethnic groups. But as I say, because it was a technical rollover, that wasn't included in the rollover resolution for UNIMA. However, this is something that you can have an effect on because the independent assessment by an expert that will be ongoing can certainly be influenced by expressions from the Canadian government to report on that. We urged, in other words, UNIMA to hire people from other ethnic groups in our resolution. But it is also possible, I think, in Canada, as you have put it, to work outside the UNHCR refugee system, to accept refugees who come in from and are supported by church groups, by many other people, by mosques, by all kinds of people. And I think that's a real good way around this problem. We saw it again. We saw the same thing in Iraq. I've been to Kurdistan, I don't know how many times now, but the UNHCR there was also too heavily influenced by, non-Kurdish people, and so Christians often didn't make it through.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. I think that's important testimony, and we had asked at the time for information from the government about the proportions of certain minority communities that were represented in our refugee resettlement, and we were told that those numbers weren't tracked. So we're not even assessing how we're doing in terms of being inclusive, and it's a real problem that even in refugee resettlement, we're not necessarily being inclusive of the most vulnerable in our processes. In the about 30 seconds I have left, Mr. Stanton, I wonder if you do important work at Genocide Watch. I wonder if there are any other areas in the world with genocide ongoing or high risk of genocide that you'd like to just in a perfunctory way point out to the committee for possible future study.
The answer is yes. I think that South Darfur, for instance, is under a genocide right now. Hundreds of people are being killed every day, and they have thousands. In fact, our estimates 6,000 have been killed, who are from the Black communities there by the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed have just been renamed Rapid Support Forces. These are the same people who committed the Darfur genocide in 2003. I strongly hope that Canada will investigate that. I hope the UN will send in a peacekeeping force, a really well-armed peacekeeping force, or it gets a regional organization like the African Union or ECOWAS to send in such a force to stop this genocide.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Maintenant, j'invite Monsieur Denis to...
Next, Mr. Denis Trudel, if you'd like to take the floor for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, okay? Thank you to our three witnesses. Those who answered the question have stated strongly that there was a genocide. Canada has yet to respond to this. We are writing a report with the subcommittee that may be useful in helping Canada come to recognizing this genocide. Now, could each of you add something to this? Is there anything important that you don't think that was mentioned yet that could be included in this report that will hopefully lead to this recognition of genocide? Mr. Stanton, if you'd like to begin.
I will, please. We've actually studied this. Does using the G word genocide actually make any difference? We did a study back in 2007 to see what the difference was if people called it ethnic cleansing in 4 previous genocides, and what happened as soon as the word genocide became the dominant term in the New York Times, among human rights groups, in the UN, and in law reviews. It makes a huge difference. If the term ethnic cleansing is the dominant term, no force will be used to stop it. As soon as the word genocide is used, it's still a very powerful word. The use of force becomes possible. It was right after Srebrenica that finally NATO, authorized use of force in Bosnia. It was right after that declaration by David Sheffer, our war crimes ambassador, that genocide was underway in Kosovo, that we began bombing Belgrade, and they immediately surrendered. The same was true in Rwanda. The exception that proves the rule was Darfur, where even though the Secretary of State said it was genocide, they couldn't get the UN to agree. So they sent in their own commission of inquiry that said, no, there's not enough evidence of intent here, so we can't call it genocide. But guess what? That means that the genocide was never really addressed. And so it's still going on. So it makes a difference if you declare it should be genocide.
Madame Giovanni, sur la même...
Ms. Giovanni, on the same topic, what could we add to the report to make it stronger so that Canada recognize this genocide?
And please.
I think a good legal analysis is what is needed. You need to have experts on international law.
Merci, mais je posais la question, Madame.
Thank you, but I was asking Ms. Giovanni very briefly. Mr. Chair, is that okay?
This genocide has happened to my great-grandfather all the way to me, and because this crime and this what is happening to us doesn't have a name, we cannot address this. But if it has a name, like, you can persecute this and you can take away the impunity of the people who commit this and the people who benefit from this. Nowadays, people who committed this and benefit from it indirectly, they deny it, and it hurts us. Like, as much as what they did to my great-grandparents, as much as what they did to me, it hurts me when they deny it. And this recognition is a relief, and it's very meaningful to my community and me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Merci,
And
Monsieur le
now
Président.
I invite Ms. McPherson to take the floor for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with the question that my colleague from the bloc has just asked, and I certainly want to give some space so that we can hear from all of the witnesses. Mr. Sultani, I know your hand was up if you'd like to intervene.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that, the Hazara community have lost about 62 or more of their populations, and they have faced decades of, perpetual, widespread, and systematic discriminations. So that is what, and that is how the over a century history of the Hazara is, and I believe this committee has the power and has the tool to at least recognize what the Hazara has gone through and what the challenges that they are facing. So, institutionally, opinion might differ, but to me personally, so the Hazaras have not only faced, but they are facing genocidal attack, and that continues today. And we see that from Daesh, and we saw that in the 90s, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think that's a good place to end our meeting.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Merci pour vos témoignages.
Thank you for being with us today. Witnesses, thank you for participating in our study of the Hazara situation, the situation rather of the Hazaras in Afghanistan. If you have any further comments, you can send them to our clerk. On behalf of all members of the committee,
On behalf of all members of the committee, I would like to thank all the witnesses for your thought, for your participation. It was an extremely interesting meeting. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Is the will for the committee? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Ganes.
Chair, just a brief question. I know we had discussed future business at our last meeting. It was in camera. Are we? Has it been our practice to invite written submissions on those? Is that something that we should agree to do? Or I don't want to surprise folks. We can maybe discuss it later. But I thought because we're going to be starting potential new studies, it might be worth inviting written briefs as well. Are people comfortable with that? Okay.
Committee? Yeah. Okay. If
Sure.
the committee agree, no problem.
Okay, so we just put out there the opportunity for people in the next two studies to send in written briefs as well. For the for the next two. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Is the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.